abhadreshu tam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati Chapter 10, text 26. This chapter is entitled as Bhagavatam is answer to all questions. Text 26. Nirabhidyata śiśnaḥ prajānandāmṛtārthinaḥ upastha āsīt kāmānāṁ priyaṁ tad-ubhayāśrayam nirabhidyata śiśno prajānandāmṛtārthinaḥ upastha āsīt kāmānāṁ priyaṁ tad-ubhayāśrayam nirabhidyata śiśno prajānandāmṛtārthinaḥ upastha āsīt kāmānāṁ priyaṁ tad-ubhayāśrayam nirabhidyata śiśno prajānandāmṛtārthinaḥ upastha āsīt kāmānāṁ priyaṁ tad-ubhayāśrayam came out, śiśnaḥ, the genital, certainly, prajānanda, sex pleasure, amṛta-arthinaḥ, aspiring to taste the nectar, upastha, the male or female organ, āsīt, came into existence, kāmānāṁ, lustful, priyaṁ, very dear, tad, that, ubhaya-āśrayam, shelter for both. Translation by his divine. Thereupon, for sexual pleasure, begetting offspring, and tasting heavenly nectar, the Lord developed the genitals, and thus there is the genital organ and its controlling deity, Prajāpati. The object of sexual pleasure and the controlling deity are under the control of the genitals of the Lord. Purport by Srimad Bhagavatam. The heavenly pleasure for the conditioned soul is sexual pleasure, and this pleasure is tasted by the genitals. The woman is the object of sexual pleasure, and both the sense perception of sexual pleasure and the women are controlled by the Prajāpati, who is under the control of the Lord's genital. The impersonalist must know from this verse that the Lord is not impersonal, for he is his genitals on which all the pleasurable objects of sex depend. No one would have taken the trouble to maintain children if there were no taste of heavenly nectar by means of sexual intercourse. This material world is created to give the conditioned souls a chance for rejuvenation, for going back home. And therefore, generation of the living being is necessary for accomplishment of the purpose of creation. Sexual pleasure is an impetus for such action, and as such, one can even serve the Lord in the act of such sexual pleasure. The service is counted when the children born of such sexual pleasure are properly trained in God consciousness. The whole idea of material creation is to revive the God consciousness of the living entities. In forms of life other than human form, sexual pleasure is prominent without any motive of service for a mission of the Lord. But in the human form of life, the conditioned soul can render service to the Lord by creating progeny suitable for the attainment of salvation. One can beget hundreds of children and enjoy the celestial pleasure of sexual intercourse, provided he is able to train the children in God consciousness. Otherwise, begetting children is on the level of the swine. Otherwise, the begetting children is on the level of swine. Rather, the swine is more expert than the human beings, because the swine can beget a dozen piglets at a time, whereas the human beings can give birth to only one at a time. So one should always remember that the genital sexual pleasure, the women and the offspring are all related in the service of the Lord. And one who forgets the relationship in the service of the Supreme Lord becomes subjected to the threefold miseries of material existence by the law of nature. Perception of sexual pleasure is there even in the body of the dog, but there is no sense of God consciousness. The human form of life is distinct from that of the dog by the perception of God consciousness. Nirabhidyata śiśno prajā-ānanda upasthaḥ kāmānāṁ priyaṁ tad-ubhayāśrayam. Thereupon, for sexual pleasure, begetting offspring, and testing heavenly nectar, the Lord developed the genitals. And thus, there is the genital organ and its controlling deity, the Prajāpati. The object of sexual pleasure and the controlling deity are under the control of the genitals of the Lord. So, from this we can see, from this chapter, especially this chapter, this part of this chapter is describing that how everything in this material nature is a result of the Supreme Personality of God, His desire. His desire is pure, whereas our desires are contaminated. Why our desires are contaminated? Why the conditioned living entities' desires are contaminated? Because they are centered around their own self. When we think of things centered around ourselves, then it is Maya. And when it is in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then it is devotion. Then it is Krishna. That is the thing that we have to understand in every step. What is the second verse of the Chatushloki? Okay. Say. Very good. And the meaning? Okay.
Whatever appears to be of any relation, if it is without relation to, has no relation. No, it is no individual.
Let's deal with this point. Riteartham jat pratiyeta. Pratiyeta appears to be real, appears to be existing. But riteartham means? Rite means without any connection to me. Jat pratiyeta, but not pratiyeta cha. Is not in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, tad-ubhayāśrayam. That is what illusion is, Maya is. If it is not connected to Krishna, it is not. So, we get a very clear understanding of what Maya or material is. Material is something Material nature is that is without any relationship with Krishna. On the other hand, if something is in relation to Krishna, then it is. If something is related to Krishna, then what? Then that is God. So that is the difference between material and spiritual. Material is without any relationship with Krishna, and spiritual is when it is in relation to Krishna, when it is related to Krishna. So here also we are getting the explanation of what does it mean to be related to Krishna. 9th chapter gave the Chatushloki, and the 10th chapter is giving the explanation to the Chatushloki. Actually, the entire Srimad Bhagavatam is the elaboration of the Chatushloki. What has been spoken in these 4 verses is the entire Srimad. And that's what we have to understand. That is the meaning, that is the crux of the matter. Doesn't matter whatever it is. And Prabhupada is pointing out that even the sexual act, the act of sexual intercourse can be devotional. When? When it is with an objective to procreate children to be brought up in Krishna. Everything is with a purpose. Even the act of a union between a man and a woman has an objective. What is the objective? The objective is to procreate children. What kind of children? Qualified children. Not cats and dogs. And that's the difference between the animal society and human society. Animal society, the animals do not really have any objective, any far sight, any distant vision. Like why they are doing something. They act just on the immediate impulse. And with the animals, the thing is, those impulses are created by nature. We have seen most of the animals, they develop this desire for sex life only at a certain period of time. Even cats and dogs, they have their specific period. A certain time of the year they develop this urge. And what is the purpose of the urge? The nature is directing. The animal is not thinking that now I have to have some offspring, so let me get married. Animal doesn't think that. A dog doesn't think, oh, let me get married. Or let me have some children. And let me make sure that these children don't grow up like cats and dogs. These children have a specific objective, that is, let them become devotees of Krishna. Actually, in animal society also, they are devotees. Even in animal society, they are devotees. Like among the birds, Garuda is a bird, is a devotee. Arun is a bird, is a devotee. Jatayu is a bird, was a bird, is a devotee. Sampati, these are all birds, but they are devotees of Krishna. Among the animals we see Hanuman, the monkey, is a devotee. And not only Hanuman, there is a whole group of them. Sugriv, Angad, these are all devotees of Krishna. So even in the animal society they can become devotees. So what to speak of human beings? So we have to understand that the purpose of the human form of life is to become a devotee. And devotee of Krishna means understand who Krishna is and surrender. Devotional service is not blind. Spiritual life is not blind. Everything must have a proper understanding. Why we do something must be motivated with certain objective. And that objective is that we must accept the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His arrangements. It's not only the Supreme Personality of Godhead's authority. Accepting the authority means accepting the arrangement that the authority has established. That's why we have to be submissive to the demigods. Human beings are meant to be submissive to the demigods because they are the controlling authority in the material nature. And the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining that. The demigods and human beings have an interlink. And for that, Krishna has created the process of sacrifice. And what kind of authoritative structure this is? Krishna is not telling that everybody should submit to the demigods, thinking that the demigods are the Supreme Personality of God. That's the mistake that people make. Oh, Krishna is God and Ganesh also is God. They don't understand the difference between Bhagavan and Devas. These are Devas. Indra, Chandra, Varun, Ganesh, Saraswati, Lakshmi, these are Devatas. They are the controlling authorities of the material nature. And to think that they are equal, that's the mistake. That's the problem that the Vaishnavas generally try to address. It's not that the Vaishnavas are against the demigods, but the thing is they try to make the understanding what's the difference between the Supreme Personality of God and the demigods. And that's why we need to understand the Brahma Samhita. Brahma Samhita and Srimad Bhagavatam also gives a very clear understanding. The difference between the demigods, and that's why Prabhupada used the expression demigods. Sometimes people think that's why we are calling them demigods. The demigods, sometimes the expression used in a derogatory way, like bhutas and pretas and pishachas sometimes are addressed as demigods in general English. But Prabhupada wanted to make a very clear distinction between, in one hand, the Supreme Personality of God, and on the other hand, the demigods. Otherwise, in English, they all have been lumped with the one expression, God. Krishna is God, Indra is God, Kubera is God, everyone is, in English, everyone is God. And that is a mistake that they make, thinking that Hinduism is polytheistic. Hinduism believes in many gods. No, Hinduism doesn't believe in many gods. And unfortunately, today's Hindus have been trained up by the British. And that's why they also think that Sahib bola hai, Bharatiya log bahut dev devi mante hain, to hum log maan liya hai. Unfortunately, the problem within the recent Indian culture was the British colonialism. British wrote the history, British wrote everything for the Indians. And Indians accepted, Sahib bola. Because the Englishmen said, it must be correct. Because they became their slaves for 400 years. Now we have to undo that. And that was the mission of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. That was the mission of Srila. To make everybody understand that the Indian culture, the Vedic culture, is the most profound culture in this world. But whereas the British for 400 years made the Indians think that all these Vedic cultures, Vedic scriptures are mythology. These are fairy tales. And they established a culture where Superman is real and Vedic characters are mythology. Krishna is myth. Lord Shiva is a myth. Ramchandra is a myth. Hanuman is a myth. But if we think that this is a myth, how will we have any faith in them? On the other hand, if we recognize that these are absolute truth, whatever has spoken in the Vedas is the absolute truth, then only we will understand the greatness of this Vedic culture. And the Vedic culture, again, it's not an Indian culture. Vedic culture is not an Indian culture. Vedic culture is a human culture. It's meant for the human beings all over the world, and that's what Prabhupada established. Prabhupada went all over the world and made the people recognize the value of the Vedic culture, and they naturally became attracted to that. Prabhupada went to America, the Americans accepted. Why they accepted? Because they were in love with India? No. Most of those Americans didn't even have anything to do with India. Many of those Americans who thought that India is a lost cause. They didn't have any appreciation for India whatsoever. But what did they appreciate? They appreciated the wisdom. The wisdom that these scriptures are presenting. Bhagavad Gita, look at what is in Bhagavad Gita. Is that Bhagavad Gita only for Hindus or the Indians? No, Bhagavad Gita is for everybody. Dehi nashmin jatha dehi kāmānāṁ yovanam. The body grows from childhood to youth to old age, and then eventually it dies. Now, is it applicable only to the Hindus? Not to the Muslims? It's applicable to anybody. Everybody's body, even the animal bodies, go through that transformation from the childhood to youth to old age and death. Tatha dehanta. In this way we can see Bhagavad Gita is not talking about a faith. Bhagavad Gita is speaking about the absolute reality, which is applicable to everybody. And here we are seeing Srimad Bhagavatam is dealing with such profound understanding and giving the ultimate solution. The profound understanding is everything makes so much sense. In this way we can understand like what is the link between our desire and Lord's arrangement. Every desire has a purpose. Every desire has a purpose. Like, why do you feel hungry? Because it feels good? Huh? Why do you feel hungry? Because when the stomach needs food, we feel hungry. Right? So everything has a reason. And we have to understand the reason. Okay, now this is what Krishna consciousness is teaching us. How to link everything with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not just by imagination, but by proper understanding. Why are you hungry? Because the stomach needs food. Why do we need food? Because the body machine has to burn. Right? Body machine needs energy. How is the energy generated? Energy is generated by burning the fuel. You know how an automobile engine runs? How a motor car runs? How a motor car runs? What do you put in motor? You put petrol. What is the petrol? Petrol is the fuel. Fuel that burns. Why do we need to burn the petrol? Because the engine needs energy, and by burning the fuel, the energy is generated. The power is generated, and that makes our machine run. So similarly, our body also is like a machine. And our body actually all the machines are a replication of our body. Our body is the real machine, body machine. Jantra Ruhani Maya. By the arrangement of Maya, Krishna made the spirit souls situated in different jantras, meaning machine. And what is the purpose of riding in those machines? Brahmayan sarva bhutani. He is making all the living entities travel. Brahmana, Brahmaya. Sometimes uddham gachanti shatastha madhye tishtati rajasa jaganna punapratishya adho gachanti. Sometimes somebody goes up. How does he go up? When he is in the mode of goodness, he goes up. When one is in the mode of passion, he remains in the middle. And when one becomes degraded, when one becomes affected by the abominable characteristics or nature of the mode of ignorance, then Jaganna Guna Pritishya Adhogarshanti. One is degraded downwards. So this is how Kobu Sharge, Kobu Marte, Naroke Vaku. Sometimes the living entity is going to Sarvaloka on top. Sometimes in the earth planet, Martaloka. Sometimes he is going to the Patalaloka, Naraka. So in this way the living entity is traveling constantly. But for how long would you like to travel? After some travel you become tired. Then what do you want? When you become tired of traveling, then what do you want? And then you want to go home. So the purpose of our coming to the material nature is to develop a proper desire to go home. We are in a vacation in this material nature. We are on a vacation, we are in a holiday. And in the holiday we thought that we'll have a lot of fun. But what we are getting in the holiday, instead of fun, we are getting beaten up and we are suffering. So what should we do? When he started to suffer initially, the travel sounds very exciting. When people travel, when people go out on a vacation, when does he do that? He does it at a particular time of the year when he has saved a lot of money, right? And then he goes out on a vacation. And in a vacation, he has to spend money. There, he can't earn money. So he spends and spends, and then what happens? He becomes broke. He doesn't have any more money. Then what happens? When he is traveling and he doesn't have any money, then he begins to suffer. Then he begins to suffer. He tries to earn money, but it's so difficult. He has to take up all kinds of odd jobs. Dishwasher's job, sweeper's job. And those jobs give very little money. He works hard, but gets some very little in return. And in this way, he becomes poverty-stricken. And poverty-stricken condition leads him to suffering. And he suffers and suffers. But he has been traveling for so long that he even forgot about his home. So at that time, fortunately, if somebody comes and tells him, look, why are you suffering here? Why don't you go back home? He asks, home? Where is it? Home is where your father is. Who is my father? Your father is a very rich man. Oh, is my father a very rich man? Tell me about him. And then you get to know about the father. And he is not only a very rich man, he is the richest man. And then you get to know he is not only the richest man, he is the most powerful man. Then you get to know he is the most handsome person, most beautiful person. We get to know he is the most famous person, he is the most wise person. And how he is waiting for us to go back to him. When you get this information, then we want to go back to him. And as a result of that, we get transported to our home, where our Father God is the Supreme Personality of God. Going back home, back to God. So that is the sum and substance of all that we are trying to do in this life. Recognize our situation in the material nature and understand where we actually belong. Recognize our relationship with the Supreme Personality of God. Become aware of His greatness and then just depend upon His mercy to go back to Him. And all the descriptions here are simply to achieve that. Whatever we do, the sum and substance of the teachings is that do it in relationship with Krishna. Try to understand how it is in relationship with Krishna. As I was telling about food, we want to eat food. Why? Because the body needs it. And that's why this feeling of hunger, that craving, we want it, we want the food. Because the body needs the food. Without the food, the body will not flow. Similarly, every act, and in this particular verse it has been pointed out, even that act of sex desire has an objective. And that objective is for civilization. It is nature's arrangement, Lord's arrangement through the nature. There is a need for progeny. There is need for living entities to come to the material nature, get a body, or the living entities who are already in the material nature, they need a body. The state of a living entity, state of a spirit soul in the material nature is, generally it remains in a dormant stage, in a sleeping stage. And he can wake up from the sleeping stage only when he gets an appropriate body. And there are two types of bodies. Gross body and the subtle body. And specifically one needs a gross body to become properly active. And in that gross body, a living entity gets a chance to fulfill his desires. And when one gets the human form, human body, that body is very, very important. Because in that body one gets a chance to develop his relationship with the Supreme Personality of God. Why? Because it needs a proper understanding. And in order to understand, what do we need? Understanding comes from where? Huh? Yeah, very good. Understanding comes from intelligence. Now what kind of intelligence? The more intelligent we are, the more greater is our ability to understand. Greater is the ability to understand. Now human beings have an ability to expand his intelligence to an unlimited extent, which other living entities don't have. There are two types of living entities apart from human beings, right? The subhuman beings, the animals, birds, reptiles, and so forth. Their intelligence is very, very limited. Very limited. Practically nil. And there are superhuman beings, the demigods. Their intelligence is much greater than human beings. But still, human beings have a greater facility. That is, although their intelligence is much less than a demigod's, but he has the ability to expand his intelligence to an unlimited extent. Endlessly he can expand his intelligence, which demigods cannot. Although they have greater intelligence, but their intelligence is not unlimited, their intelligence is limited. And that's why the demigods also pray to Krishna. Please, those who are situated in proper understanding, they pray to Krishna, please give us the human form. If we have a little bit of karma, sukriti left, a little bit of piety left, with the piety let us get a birth. especially in the land of Bhagavad worship. Why? Because they know that human form of life awards the opportunity to expand with intelligence to enlightenment. And when does the human intelligence begin to expand? Human intelligence begins to expand when it becomes exposed to two conditions. The human consciousness is endowed with, compared to a lotus. And the lotus has, how does the lotus bloom? Lotus bud bloom. Lotus bud, for the lotus to bloom, it needs two conditions. One is it needs the exposure to the sun, and it needs the shelter of the water. If the sun is there, but if the lotus is not in water, then what will happen? The sun will dry the lotus. The lotus bud will not bloom. When the lotus is in the water and it's exposed to the sun, it expands, it blooms. Similarly, human consciousness, when it is under the shelter of the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, and it is exposed to Krishna, the supreme personality of God, who is compared to the sun, then his consciousness begins to blossom. And in that blooming or full blooming state of consciousness, he begins to become aware of the Supreme Personality. So that is the prerogative the human beings have, the others do not. The demigods are surrendered to Krishna, but they cannot become, generally they are not pure devotees. It's only in the human form of life that one gets an opportunity to become a pure devotee. What is the criteria for pure devotion? What is the definition of pure devotion? Annabhilashita shunam, no other desire. Jnana karmānāṁ anāpritam, no more tinge of jnana. Anukullena krishnam shivanam. Uttam bhakti, the pure devotion, is defined with this. The demigods, they do not have, their demigods are mostly karma mishra. And the sages, those who are even situated in a higher position than the sages, in Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka, they are affected by jnana. So their devotion, although they are devotees, but their devotion is tinged with jnana. But a pure devotee is jnana karmānāṁ anāpritam. Especially when they come in contact with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Kirtan movement, they get a chance to develop this pure devotion in a very, very simple and easy. They begin to understand that just by being engaged in Krishna's service, everything will be achieved. Everything will be achieved. Krishna bhakti koile, sarva. If we just serve Krishna, everything will be done. Everything will be accomplished. And so that's why we all are here in ISKCON, and that's what we have to understand. There should not be any other motive. Why this process has become very simple in this age? Because in Mahaprabhu's mission, our business is to distribute Krishna Prem. Mahaprabhu gave Krishna Prem, we got Krishna Prem, and let's distribute. There is no desire for even to enjoy it ourselves. distribute, preach. And because it's a preaching mission, that's why it is so directly linked with pure devotion. And what is the mood of a pure devotee? Mama Janmani Janma Ishwari. Life after life, no desire for even liberation. Not even this devotee is not even asking, oh please let me, after this life, let me go back. That is also abhilasha, desire. And what kind of desire? The desire that stems from jnana, liberation. The goal is liberation. Jnana's goal is liberation, and karma's goal is enjoyment in this material nature. Bhakti and mukti. But desire doesn't even, a devotee doesn't even have the desire for liberation. If I have to come back, I'll come back millions of times to deliver this. That is the movement. I will make all kinds of arrangements for the devotees. I'll make all kinds of arrangements for the glory of the Lord to spread all over the world. I'll make all kinds of arrangements for helping the devotees to spread the glory of the Lord. I'll make all kinds of arrangements for those who haven't become devotees to become devotees. So that is the only objective that a follower of Sri Chaitanya has. But I am prepared to make all kinds of arrangements. Life after life. And why life after life? Why he doesn't want liberation? Why doesn't he care for liberation? Because this engagement to the devotional service is so wonderful, so full of joy. Because this engagement in devotional service is already a liberated state. So if you are already liberated, why should I separately desire for liberation? And when we know that if I can be engaged in this service, life after life, it will be actually an experience of liberated state. A devotee is already liberated. That's why he doesn't separately want separation. So that is the reason why we are here. Thank you all very much. Glories to Shri. Does anybody have any question?
The desire to enjoy sexual pleasure actually comes from a very strong desire to enjoy the material nature, which is actually opposed to the nature of the soul, which is to serve Krishna. So a pure devotee, how can he ever have such desire? And if he cannot have such desire, then how can he procreate?
It's not that a pure devotee has a sex desire, that's why he procreates. That's the difference between a pure devotee and a mundane person. But a pure devotee gets involved in that act because there is a need. The Lord wants him, that's why he indulges. Like Arjuna is fighting the battle, not because he loves to fight the battle. Not that he wants to have a kingdom, but Krishna wanted to have him fight. That's it. So that's the difference between a mundane conditioned and a pure.
But is it possible to procreate without having a desire to enjoy?
With a sense of duty, what like somebody is working because he is getting some money. Right? But somebody is working because Krishna wants him. Now your question is something like, can anybody ever work without any motivation of getting money? Right? Yes, if he is inspired by his love for Krishna, then yes, he could do anything. He is not motivated by the momentary gift or reward. And that an ordinary person does. He does it for the result. At the end of the month, I will get the money, that's why I am working through. And for a mundaner, it's difficult to understand how somebody can work without getting any money. Are you getting any money? Then why are you working? You're working here, aren't you? You're employed by this company. You're working. What are you getting in return? Huh? Are you getting the salary? So answer it like that.
Guru Maharaj, the living entities in this material world are in dormant state. So do they have subtle body at that time? And if they don't have, then where do they live?
Good point. Good point. Yeah. There are dormant states have 3 stages. Right? No, actually dormant state, or rather let's put it this way. Besides the dormant state, there are 2 other stages. Dormant stages, completely unconscious. Right? So that stage is like the sleeping stage. Right? Deep sleep. But besides that, there are 2 other stages. One is the dream stage. You're sleeping, right? But then you're dreaming. Are you really sleeping? You're dreaming. So in the dreaming state, the subtle body is active, but the gross body is not. That's the dream stage. Then the wakeful stage. The wakeful stage is when both the subtle body and the gross body are active. So these are the 3 different stages. Right? Jagriti, Shapna, and Shushupti. Right? And Shupti means sleep. Shushupti means deep sleep. Right? So one is wakeful stage, one is dream stage, and one is deep sleep stage.
So, Guru Maharaj, if the living entity is free from both the bodies, so where the living entity is situated, where it is in this material world?
Where it is in the material world? It's in the material nature, but in a deep sleep, like say for example you're lying in your bed, right? But you are in deep sleep. Where are you? Where are you?
On the bed.
You are in the material nature. You are in the material nature, but you're also not in it, but you do not know where you are. Right? That is the stage of deep sleep. You are in the material nature. Because that's why you are unconscious. If you're conscious, then you would have been either in the material nature or you would have been in the spiritual nature. The consciousness can be either in the material nature or the spiritual nature. But deep sleep is the stage, it is in the material nature, but not conscious of the material nature or the conscious of the spiritual nature. So after deep sleep you wake up. Where do you wake up? Generally wake up in this side of the nature. But if someday you wake up on the other side, you find yourself in the spiritual side. Okay?
One question related to the class, if you permit, one small question may not be exactly right. So the question related to the class is that you were saying that at the end of the lecture that the devotee wants to preach and have the conditioned souls to go back to Godhead. So the acharyas have been preaching according to time, place and circumstance. So at the present moment, the exact, how to package Krishna consciousness in such a way that people can accept it. How do you get the intelligence to know how exactly it has to be? What should the strategy for fixing it?
Chant the holy name without offenses. Krishna will give that. Krishna will guide you. How to preach effectively. Pure chanting or pure intention, pure devotion will qualify.
And regarding gambling, does so many kinds of business are actually, it's different to say when it comes in the gambling, like the stock market and things like that, and some business which we don't know whether it flourishes or something. But does it come under gambling?
Does it come under gambling? Yes, in a way it is coming under gambling. There is speculation. But if it is for Krishna, then even gambling can be alright. When it is for developing Krishna consciousness. Because in Krishna, that's the thing, although apparently it is not prescribed in this age. But if it is for the sake of, it's not pure gambling as such, plain simple gambling as such. But it's one's business. Like what he is doing is in a way he's speculating that this investment is going to generate more money. So they are not actually, the difference between regular business and stock market thing is that in a real business, one deals with the commodities. Real business, general business has, say, three things: production and distribution, right, and collection. Right? So you produce, you sell, mainly two aspects. You produce and you sell. And by selling, the third aspect comes in. You make a profit. Production, sales, profit. Right? But in stock market exchange, they don't do any production. Production is doing others, and they are actually speculating that this company's value is going to go up. So invest in them in the name of the company, in the shares. That's the thing about public limited company. They're public domain. Anybody can buy the share. And then you expect that the share value will go up. So you are not directly involved in the production, nor you are directly involved in the sale, but you counting on their profit. So my advice will be that it's better to try to avoid that. Better to try to avoid that. Devotee should try to avoid that kind of business. Because it's speculation. Better to do the hard work. Go to the field, plow the land, produce the food, and yes, sell it. That is more noble. Right? But what to do, like the modern society has created all kinds of arrangements in the name of business.
And it so happens that in a particular kind of setup it becomes very inevitable, like when somebody is into a corporate field or some corporate kind of companies, one is forced to, in a sense, to have shares and to at least distribute the shares. In certain environments, certain fields, it becomes like inevitable. like say VIP sector and things like that. Like any big private company, it has to have its shares. So is that field totally to be given up by devotees?
It depends, like difficult to just make any comment sitting here. We have to see the intention. And our understanding is that if fighting a battle, killing the relatives can be devotional service, then everything can be included. Provided it is with your intention.